Welcome to Canadian Beer Journal. My name is Kevin. In anticipation of Beer Fest, I've got another horrible Hawaiian beer-themed shirt to match the black one I went with last year. So definitely looking forward to it. I know I'd been kind of down on it before in the previous video. I wasn't sure if I was going to go. I still stand by the fact that it's mostly a product show for the LCBO and the beer store. There's not a lot of stuff that you can't buy there. I'd say there's enough to at least make it worth checking out. But the real thing for me is it's a chance to go with my buddies and hang out, and that, definitely makes a good day out of it. So I'm happy to go again, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully there'll be some exclusive cast there. I know that they have some sort of either East Coast or West Coast brewers tent there. I remember the first time we went, there was a Quebec tent, and that had some amazing stuff. And last time it was a West Coast tent, but it was sort of BC stuff that you could already get in the LCBO. So hopefully they've gone back to the previous model, and there'll be some more interesting things there. Anyhow, the beer, as promised, is another Flying Monkey specialty product. It is Shoulders of Giants Imperial IPA. It's got a really cool label on it. Coming in at 10% alcohol by volume, so I don't think there's going to be any argument over whether or not this is an Imperial IPA. I know some people were kind of mad at Garrison's Brewery. They do an Imperial IPA that's only 7% alcohol. People are saying that's just a regular IPA. To me, the naming conventions, single IPA, double IPA, Imperial IPA, they're more like suggestions. They're just guides to go with. The numbers will only tell you so much. So this, lay out a strict, say by alcohol percentage. I know that's how some people do it. They'll say 5 to 7.5 is single, 7.5 to 9 is double, 9 plus is Imperial or triple. First off, I don't think Imperial necessarily implies that it's heavier strength than a single or a double. It's just sort of a naming convention. I think people associate Russian Imperial stouts tend to be much bigger than regular stouts, so they just move that naming convention over. But the thing is that even by categorizing it through alcohol percentage, to me is a bit wonky, since double IPA, the term came out of double hopping the beers, not raising the alcohol. I mean, if you look at Stone Ruination and Pliny the Elder, two of the original, they're only around 8%. I think Pliny's 8, Ruination 7.7. It's the hopping that was the big thing. So, I mean, are you going to go by IBUs only that produces other problems because it's not telling you sort of which hops are there? So to me, I don't follow that too closely. Yes, I think it's a bit strange to market a 7% pure as an Imperial IPA, because I think that for some people that might be misleading, but they don't hide the actual alcohol percentage on the label. I think it's just, especially in that case, what it was is coming out of Nova Scotia, they had to really separate themselves from Alexander Keith's IPA, which was what people sort of thought an IPA was on the East Coast, until breweries like John Allen, better known as Propeller, and Garrison really did something about it. So I don't have a big problem with it. To me, if you want to call it a single IPA and market it at 10% and 150 IBUs, go right ahead. But it is helpful just to know right off the bat that you see Imperial IPA. That should give you an idea. I guess it's not really a straight answer, but there you go. You'll have to live with it. So this is coming in at 10% alcohol by volume, which seems to be fairly standard for the Flying Monkey specialty bottles. I'm not sure if it's the yeast they're using or the fermentation process particularly. A lot of them seem to come in at 10%. I think the B&L Stout, Chocolate Manifesto, the first Matador, the second Matador just came out at 10.1, and this one's coming at 10. Yeah, I guess it's just the number they're comfortable brewing up to. It's coming in at it says right there, a somewhat surprising 86 IBUs. Now, again, I just got through saying that you can't go by the numbers alone, so I'm not using that to prejudge the beer, but it is interesting to me sort of from an optics perspective. A lot of breweries, especially because the reason for the name behind this one is to pay tribute to all the hop bombs that have come before it out of North American breweries. when you're marketing beer at 10%, most breweries are going to go into triple-digit IBUs. In fact, I'd say most breweries that are marketing an IPA tend to use the rule ABV times 10. So if you're marketing a 6.5% beer, you'll have a minimum of 65 IBUs if you're calling it a sort of West Coast IPA. So 86 IBUs is definitely assertive. I mean, that's a huge number in a regular beer, but you're starting to see some single IPAs go into that. I mean, My Bitter Wife from Great Lakes Brewing came out at 7% and 88 IBUs, or Green Flash, 7.3%, 99 IBUs, and one I just picked up recently, Rogue's Daddy's Little Helper Black IPA. That one's 6% and 92 IBUs. So, it's interesting just from an optics perspective. I hope it doesn't hurt the beer if indeed it is as good as I'm hoping it's going to be. So, with that out of the way, let's get the top off here. Glassware is a bit of an interesting issue. I still tend to go with the Bruegel or Snifter. You can use a Duvel glass or even a wine glass for these beers just based on the size. But some breweries I know recommend actually just a regular shaker glass or pint glass because the hop aromas are going to be so strong. They don't necessarily need a lot of help. And I've heard some people say that they actually prefer the standard pint glass because it lets the malt aromas kind of fight for space when the hop aromas are being shoved up in there. But I don't know, to me, I still like using this glass. So we have a burnt orange sort of color, fairly clear. I'm trying to see, there's a bit of a chill haze still. Maybe just a tiny bit of haze in there. Very low carbonation, as you can tell, as you would expect from a 10% beer. But you did get a decent head, about a finger and a half by my count. And that looks pretty much like what I expect a double or imperial IPA to look like. Alright, let's get a nose on this. So up the top, from back here, I was getting a fair amount of tropical fruit, actually. But up close, I'm really getting a lot of malt, actually. A surprising amount. There's still a definite hop sort of dankness to it. I can smell sort of the alpha acid bitterness in there. I'm getting a bit of maybe ripe mango. And one sort of, it's hard to tell, it's almost a slightly chemically note. It's interesting. The hops in this, incidentally, that they've identified are Amarillo Galaxy and Falconer's Flight. So Falconer's Flight is a newer school hop variety. It's been out for the last couple of years. I've seen it used in Muskoka's Harvest Ale, actually, which should be coming out soon enough. It usually comes out around my birthday, September 1st. So it might be the Amarillo in there, just giving sort of a spicy kind of, not quite a mint note, but something in that range, something like a thyme or something like that. But yeah, definitely a lot of malt back there. I can smell sort of a biscuity, almost donutty sort of malt there and a bit of sweetness. Alright, cheers, let's have a taste. Okay, so very bitter up front, then developing into sort of a candied cherry sort of deal happening in the middle. Again, a lot of malt. And it's the sort of malt that you'd expect out of a double IPA. That sort of sticky, sweetish, kind of candy sugar sort of malt. Definitely a bitter finish. Maybe a little bit of citrus in there, but not quite as much of a hop presence as I was expecting. There's definitely that bitterness there. But I'm not getting a lot of distinct hop notes, so I'm going to let it warm up a little bit. Maybe that'll activate it a little bit more. There is a bit of alcohol heat already, which, I mean, for a 10% beer, that's pretty much par for the course. And I don't mind that, actually, in an Imperial IPA. I like my Imperial IPAs a little bit messy, a little bit more fun. I find some of the more restrained ones can be a bit sterile, and to me it's just sort of like, what was the point of going with the over-the-top style if you were going to make it so conservative? Just do a single IPA and do it really well. So, to me, that's not a problem yet. It's still quite cold, so it might turn into a bit of a monster here. All right, I'll get back to you once it's warmed up a little bit more. Welcome back. This beer is up at around room temperature now, and I hate to say it, but it hasn't developed a whole heck of a lot. I got maybe a tiny bit more citrus in the nose, and maybe a tiny bit of pine on the finish, on the tongue. But as expected, the booze has made itself even more present than it was before, which is saying something. To an extent, maybe the numbers were a bit of a predictor here, 10%, 86 IBUs, maybe there just wasn't quite enough of a ratio there, but what I think it is, actually, is that Flying Monkeys has shot for some fairly exotic hop varieties in this. They haven't just gone with the standard Centennial, Chinook, Cascade, all the sort of sea hops that you're used to. They've gone with some unusual ones, and they've tried to put it into an Imperial IPA. And I think what's happening here is the only distinct hop notes you're getting through are the more familiar ones from the Amarillo. Those more subtle tropical fruit notes, I know I was getting a bit of ripe mango right when I poured it when it was dead cold. Those are being subsumed by the malt, which is just so powerful. It has to be at 10%. It's syrupy, it's thick, it's really sweet. It's attacking the palate, I'd say, just as hard as the hops are in this particular mix. And that's unfortunate, because I think it was a brave move on Flying Monkey's part, but what we're left with is another one of their flawed masterpieces. And it really is a shame, because Flying Monkeys does something that a lot of other brewers don't do, and that's release highly experimental beers. A lot of brewers, they'll do it sort of on their casks or brew pub only, but you don't get a lot of sort of totally unfamiliar stuff going into the LCBO from them. Maybe some of the Tank 10 stuff from GLB, but even those, most of the ones that made it into the LCBOs were the IPAs and the stouts and the porters. So my argument here is that Flying Monkeys shouldn't stop doing what they're doing. Matador 1 was really neat to see an Imperial IPA aged in cedar. It's totally unique. I've never had a beer like that. Yeah, it was a bit harsh on the tongue, but it was totally different. This one, again, I haven't had an Imperial IPA with quite such an eclectic mix of hops. I know Double Mad Tom has 5 hop varieties, but they're all fairly familiar. And I think we need brewers like Flying Monkeys who are willing to take the risk, willing to release something like the previous one that we had, an Imperial Dark Rye beer aged on cedar. You're not seeing that sort of stuff come out of a lot of other breweries at this moment in Ontario in the LCBO. Might be different if you're in the States, might be different at your particular retailer or wherever you're situated, but right now, I'd say in this market, they are one of the most intrepid brewers there, and they should be encouraged. Now, am I going to recommend that you buy this beer? That's slightly different. When we're talking about the individual product here, as opposed to sort of the ethos of experimenting and releasing interesting beers, it's hard because this is a $10 beer, and that's a lot to spend on a sort of flawed masterpiece. The other problem that this particular beer has is that it is facing a lot of stiff competition right now. The LCBO is hungry to get in double IPAs. They know they sell. The growth market right now is craft beer, which is great. That means us drinkers are controlling the market, but also means it's a little bit merciless for beers like this because the LCBO gets so single-minded. First it was single IPAs, now I think it's double IPAs. You're seeing a lot of products such as the Phillips Amnesiac double IPA just came in. That's fairly well respected. That comes in from Victoria, BC. The Pyramid Brewing Outburst IPA, double IPA. That one's a bit rough around the edges, but it's $5. it's kind of hard to pass over, even though you know that some of the money is because it's an American brewery. They get taxed lower than Canadian breweries do. Anyhow, you also have Nebuchadnezzar, just came out. It's another great American IPA. You have some cool black IPAs and Belgian IPAs coming out. Um, it's kind of a crowded market for hoppy beers right now. And if you're just looking for a straight up hop bomb, this one might not be for you. I hate to say it, but if you're feeling experimental, sure, go out and grab it. But if you are just looking for more traditional Imperial IPA that hits all those Imperial IPA notes, maybe not. That said, I think as a result of some of the, we'll be generous and say eccentricities rather than missteps in this particular product, I think it's actually probably a bit more food friendly than some of your more traditional Imperial IPAs. I know people always have fun pairing it with stuff like fish tacos, and I just always find that a properly done Imperial IPA is way too much for most food dishes. This, because it's been clawed back a little bit, I'd say it would go well with like a pork dish. The alcohol heat might help cut through some of the fat. Those bitter notes are going to maybe go towards a roasted character. If you're doing, say, braised pork shoulder, it would pair probably quite well with those. Or if you're going to do cheeses, I think you could probably get away with, say, a barley wine-like pairing with some Stilton or cloth cheddar or something like that. So this beer definitely has its pluses. I like certain things about it, but for the price, for what it is, for what it's going up against, I think it's in a bad spot. Bit of a shame, but hopefully they'll get it on the next one. I'll post the written review as usual. You'll find it in the link, and I'll see you guys on the next one.